Welcome everyone. This is an introduction to ArcGIS Enterprise. My name is Scott McDonald. I'm a product engineer on the ArcGIS Enterprise team.
And my name is Thomas Edgell. I am a customer experience lead. I work heavily with ArcGIS Enterprise and the development team.
And today we are your tour guides on a safari of the ArcGIS Enterprise platform. This session is designed for people who have not a lot of experience with the Web GIS platform, with ArcGIS Enterprise in particular. It does assume some familiarity with GIS concepts, particularly desktop GIS and that kind of thing. But hopefully, whether you are new completely to ArcGIS Enterprise or whether you might use it, but you want to see a bigger picture, we can help provide that for you today. We'll be doing that by focusing on 4 key words. We think of ArcGIS Enterprise as foundational, powerful, flexible, and collaborative. To put that in a sentence, we think it's powerful because it advances what you can do with GIS while also providing a user-friendly interface. It's flexible because there are a lot of options that you have, and it's ultimately about fitting what your organization needs to do with it. It is collaborative because you can share content easily, securely, and precisely with whom it needs to be shared. And it is the foundation of your Web GIS because it integrates with every other Esri product to serve as the central hub for your Web GIS. So let's start pretty simply by defining those last 2 words of that sentence. What is Web GIS? The purpose of Web GIS is to make your geospatial content available to machines on which the underlying data does not necessarily reside. So there is a specific client side and a specific server side of Web GIS. When you're working on the client side, if you have a web app or a web map you're accessing, you don't need to download the data to your computer or to your phone or tablet, whatever you're using, in order to use the content. When you're using Google Maps, for example, you do not have access to the Google Maps server. You're sitting on the client side, but you are accessing data that's in the Web GIS. The work that you ask the map to do is not being done by your machine, but by the machines that are in the Web GIS deployment. This does 2 primary things to empower you and your organization. The first is that many people can access the content at the same time. You can collaborate, you can share things, and it's much easier to share content than printing out a map or sharing a flash drive. You're all working in the same portal. The second thing that it does is it makes your GIS much more powerful. Because you have a powerful server machine or a set of machines working together, you have tremendous amounts of processing power and memory compared to a single desktop machine. You can do more with your GIS content faster, and as your needs grow, your organization's infrastructure can also grow to meet that need. So let's think of this a little differently by thinking about how desktop GIS works. You work on your own machine with the data that you supply yourself. You might connect to an enterprise geodatabase. The work that you do is all within your desktop application. If you want to share your map, you might print it. You might put it on a flash drive. You might send it over FTP or email it, and so on. But when you use the processing power of your machine, you're limited to what's on your desktop. You can't scale up your desktop unless you move to the Web GIS system. Most of the work that you're doing in Web GIS is handled by the server-side infrastructure. It's separate from your own machine that's sitting on the client side. You work in a communal GIS portal that's shared by all the members of your organization. You're not necessarily in charge of the server infrastructure if you are in that Web GIS. You may not be the only one. It may be a small disconnected internet that's not accessible outside of your building. It could be within your organization's firewall. It could be a public Web GIS. But the point is that it's more than just your desktop computer, and that expands what you're able to do. So Web GIS, which is both ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online, are Web GIS systems. The difference being that Web GIS in ArcGIS Online is provided as a service by Esri. Esri owns the infrastructure, and provides to you the portal, which is called the ArcGIS Online organization. In Enterprise, you own the infrastructure, and you operate. You're both responsible and have complete control over all of the infrastructure in your Web GIS. Now, it's not a replacement for desktop GIS. We hear a lot of times, okay, well, I'm moving from desktop to Web GIS. That's not true. Desktop GIS is designed to work with Web GIS. ArcGIS Enterprise works closely with ArcMap and with ArcGIS Pro, serving as the central tier in the modern ecosystem of your Web GIS. The main way in which it does that is called publishing. The act of making a desktop GIS resource available on the web is called publishing. If I have a web layer, that was originally a layer in my desktop GIS, but it was published, and in ArcGIS Pro it's sometimes called sharing, which encompasses many things being published at the same time. When you do that, one or more services are built on the back-end server infrastructure and begin operating on that server. And publishing also deals with making that underlying data that I was working with in desktop available to my WebGIS, whether that's remaining where it was or being copied into the WebGIS system. So publishing is that first act of the WebGIS. Once something is sitting in my ArcGIS Enterprise, I can have it interact with my ArcGIS apps, things like Tracker, Collector. Ultimately, when you're working with those apps, field collection apps, data management apps, you're working with ArcGIS Enterprise data or ArcGIS Online data, but you're feeding back into it. Geo-enabled systems such as ArcGIS Indoors, ArcGIS Urban, ArcGIS Hub, much of which you saw yesterday in the plenary. Was that yesterday? That was 2 days ago. Wow. Much of that stuff works with ArcGIS Enterprise. ArcGIS Indoors works with data and feature layers that are housed in your ArcGIS Enterprise system. And you can work between enterprise and online through things like distributed collaboration, which we'll talk about in a bit. Throughout this whole stack of Esri products, we have a number of developer tools, APIs, SDKs, web app builders, things that allow you to customize and enrich your experience. And we have partner solutions and all sorts of things that you can use to tailor specifically to what you want to accomplish with your WebGIS. There are a lot of things that you can do with ArcGIS Enterprise. As I mentioned, the most basic thing is publishing web services. But you can also work with all kinds of data within that web browser. The ArcGIS Enterprise portal, which Thomas will explain, is a lightweight client for your web browser in which you can work with web maps and web apps just as you would work with them in the desktop. You can do powerful analysis, and you can work with all kinds of data, including complex 3D data, 3D scenes. You can also access any kind of data that you have on your machine. But it's not just about what you're doing in the web browser yourself. It's also about collaborating and communicating to empower your organization. You can always, we're always expanding the things that you can do in terms of sharing content. We have a very intuitive and simple secure sharing model where you control exactly who's seeing what your content and in what terms they get to see it. WebGIS is also about putting GIS in everyone's reach. So it may not just take the form of a classic desktop GIS map. Your business manager might be using insights to look at sales intelligence. Your field workers might use Collector or Survey 123 to gather data from the field. Your law enforcement officers, your firefighters might see enterprise sites that are their data clearinghouses, where the first place they go, where GIS is customized by you into a language that makes sense to them, where the data is right there at their fingertips, what they need. All of these apps and extensions build off of ArcGIS Enterprise to work with that data in those maps and to transform them in a collaborative way. The last set of capabilities here is about answering complex questions with groundbreaking tools. When we have multiple powerful server machines in your WebGIS, that unlocks the ability to do things like processing huge amounts of data, massive big data sets, or working with real-time data, event streams from an Internet of Things, of sensor networks. All of these things are possible with some optional components of ArcGIS Enterprise. A major focus for Enterprise this year in particular has been our data science and analytics abilities. We see machine learning and AI as more than just buzzwords. They are unlocking new abilities for us to accomplish things in GIS that weren't previously able to do without an extraordinary amount of effort on the client side. We're also lucky to have a very rich universe of Esri partners and custom developers, as well as teams within Esri who are always working to create solutions that are tailored for specific industries, that deliver something that you can't get from the overall app. These are always growing and evolving. A lot of them are here at the exhibit hall if you want to take a look at industry-specific solutions that take your GIS to the next level. So there are 12 capabilities we've talked through. Now, I should say that not all organizations use all of these. I would say that very few use all these 12 capabilities within their organization. Some may just be using 1 or 2 or 6. But even just using a few of these could have the ability to transform your organization and its workflows by bringing the power of that distributed client-side, server-side GIS system and the ability for everyone to work on a powerful Web GIS system into the fold. So Thomas is going to talk us through what Web GIS looks like.
Great. Thanks, Scott. So Scott's gone over some of the general capabilities of what ArcGIS Enterprise can accomplish, but we'd like to show what this looks like, and I'm going to show you a couple of diagrams that kind of visualize it in different ways. So to start, we have an overview of the components, which are the front-end portal, the back-end server, and the data stores. Within each of these components are pieces of software that are installed and managed in your own infrastructure, and they work seamlessly together to give you your Web GIS experience. The front-end portal is where you'll spend most of your time. It gives you an infrastructure, a sharing model, and the user and license management workflows that you need to get your organization up and running. The back-end server does most of the heavy lifting. When items are shared to the portal, it creates GIS services that power the operations. The server is able to process incoming requests to the GIS data, as well as house its own utility and analytics tools, which are very powerful. The backend server is a scalable component, and it can be expanded to meet the needs of your organization. The data stores here are a representation of the combination of the ArcGIS data store as well as your own data, whether it is a database or file-based data. So taking a quick deeper dive into the portal here, it gives you this web front end that should be familiar with anybody who has worked with ArcGIS Online, whether that is an administrator or as a publisher or a user or even just a viewer of the apps. This is a screenshot of our sample portal downstairs, and down in our expo we have a lot of machines set up where you can go and take a look and explore the portal and see its capabilities and speak with people like myself and Scott about this. Users can share their GIS content from ArcGIS Pro directly to the portal. They can manipulate it in ways that suits their needs. They can search for any content that is available within the portal from others. They can even add external items into the portal, such as services that you might be using from other organizations. You can add that into the portal and then manipulate it as an item, add it into your maps or apps. You can also tap into some of the rich content in our Living Atlas of the World libraries if you'd like access to some of that data as well. With all this information at your fingertips in a single interface, you can make some very engaging maps and apps with minimal effort. For administrators, though, the portal has an even wider range of uses. It's your user and license management hub for your company's GIS. Features like groups, content categories, webhooks, and item monitoring make content management simple and to configure and maintain. You can also do collaboration, connecting with other WebGIS systems, be it ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online, and you can send and receive content between them. Portal is very customizable. It has a website app that can be customized, but beyond that, it can be used to host sites and pages which give you focused content delivery. I mentioned in that first bullet point that the Enterprise portal is used to manage your users and your licenses, and this is really key for you administrators, which is worth exploring. So on that note, I'd like to take a moment to talk about how your users and licenses are handled by ArcGIS Enterprise, which is through user types. So user types take care of many things. First, they provide your users with an identity that they can use to log into the portal. So that would be a username and a password that they have. It's also tied to their capabilities. You might want to add somebody to your portal who's just a viewer who can see maps and can't perform any actual editing operations or own any items. Maybe you want to have a user whose capabilities are only editing, whose responsibility will be, or maybe one who will be sharing items to the portal, or maybe you need to bring in a new administrator or a field worker into the fold. Chances are that we'll have a user type that will meet your needs, or we can add some extra granularity through something called custom roles, which ensures that you can have users that can do exactly what you want them to. A great example we've seen is people having a custom role for contractors who can come in and work with items, but they can't own items themselves, nor can they export items out of the portal. In addition to being tied to a user identity and the capabilities, user types are foundational because they're tied to which apps your users will have access to. Whether you want to engage with field apps like Collector for ArcGIS or Survey123, maybe you want to use desktop applications like ArcGIS Pro, or even web-based applications like Insights or the Web App Builder, this is something that you can tie with your users, and when your user logs into your enterprise portal, they have access to all of those apps which you've configured. So next up, let's take a look at the backend server, which is ArcGIS Server. You can think of this as an engine which powers your Web GIS. When everything is configured together, those items, any items which you share to your portal, get added to your server as services. And this happens through the process of federation, which is something that is a process that joins your server with your portal. After federation, the server's security and sharing are controlled by the portal, and all server services automatically get shared to the portal. The main unit of ArcGIS Server is the site. A site is one or more machines that are joined together on equal terms, and each service in the site runs on each machine, making them available to handle requests. For example, say you had a server site that was 2 machines and you publish a service to your server, you can rest assured that that service is published to both machines, and both machines are available to handle incoming requests and traffic. These services all have their own URL endpoints. These can be accessed by the REST API, which is most commonly used by developers who want to create their own solutions with these libraries. And the services can have a number of capabilities configured on them, which can be fine-tuned or extended to match your needs. Thanks. Last up, we have the ArcGIS Data Store component, or the Data Store component. This is the most important part of your GIS, we consider at least, which is your data, and your data should be a central part to all of your workflows. When you publish your content to the ArcGIS Data Store as a hosted layer, the data is copied into a database that you install, but we maintain and manage through the system. The ArcGIS Data Store can be easily configured through an installation wizard like we have pictured there. And it can be configured in 3 different ways for various uses. For more information about these data stores details, we have some references to other sessions. I'm not sure if they're actually, they might have already happened, but
they already happened.
We can talk with it further later. Beyond this, the ArcGIS Data Store gives you the ability to create layers within your portal through the UI. So you can open up the map viewer, you can build a layer from scratch, or you can use a layer template. And this gives you all the necessary data created on the back end so that you can just get started with your layers, add content, share it, make apps, without needing to worry about where that data lives and where it's stored.
And the data store can either be configured to use typical 2D data, 3D data, or spatial temporal, big data, real-time data.
But a crucial component for WebGIS is the data itself, like we said. And for users, this is most likely your own data, which is living in folders of shapefiles maybe, or robust enterprise geodatabases that are managed by a DBA. So we're talking about your user-managed data. Beyond the ArcGIS Data Store, ArcGIS Enterprise is capable of connecting to your own user-managed data, and it gives you options for sharing this content beyond to your WebGIS for a wider consumption. So even if you don't want to copy your data into the ArcGIS Data Store, you can keep it where it is and allow ArcGIS Enterprise to access the content. Let's take a look at this from the perspective of your data. It can help to conceptualize how everything is handled in the WebGIS. So your data starts in ArcGIS Desktop as layers, feature classes, imagery, locators, 3D scenes, or more. And in the process of sharing, they're published to your server as services. The portal takes those services and enhances them as different items. And those are the items that you're going to be accessing and sharing and combining to make web maps, scenes, and apps.
We'll wait for everyone to take a picture who wants to. 5, 4. All right.
So here's a bit of a more detailed view, which shows the software components involved, as well as how your data is involved. What you can see here is that there are 3 main components of WebGIS: the portal, the server, and the data, and they're all linked together, including your user-managed data. So your GIS analysts, publishers, users, and content creators, they're going to be largely working with the enterprise portal. And then their items are stored as services in the server, and then their source data is either copied into the data store or referenced as is. Now I'm going to expand the diagram to show you where those users are, and we're going to include the ArcGIS Web Adapter in this picture. We haven't discussed the ArcGIS Web Adapter, but the main thing that you should be concerned about at this point is that it receives your incoming requests and makes sure that it goes to the right machine involved. So say you had 2 ArcGIS server machines and you use the server web adapter, it'll make sure that your requests go to the correct machine involved. But so here's where your GIS analysts will be using, and they'll be sharing their content to your enterprise. Since these items are stored in ArcGIS Server, they have service endpoints, and they're accessed and tuned by your administrators and your data managers. But they can also be tapped into by your developers who want to use our APIs to devise custom solutions. So we see here the GIS analysts will be largely using the portal, and then your administrators or your developers will be connecting more likely through to the server. Either way, you're working with the same data where it's stored, whether it's in the data store or registered and in wherever it lives in your organization.
Thanks, Thomas. So now that we've covered what the enterprise is and what it looks like, we're going to take a look at some of the powerful tools that it offers. Now, we aren't just defining power here as the ability for a large amount of machines to do incredible tasks. It's not just about supercomputers. Power is also about accessibility and efficiency. We think that ArcGIS Enterprise is powerful not just because it can do incredible computing tasks, but also because it manages your content and your data in a user-friendly way. And it offers you the ability and the control to secure your deployment precisely in the way that you need it to be. The first thing we'll talk about is server roles. This is a term for a category of ArcGIS server software. If you've included a server role in your license beyond the basic GIS server, when you deploy one or more server machines in a site, you can designate that site to serve this role. So each role has some specialized server technology, something in the back end that allows it to accomplish a set of unique tasks. The basic one is ArcGIS Server. This accomplishes all of your mapping, geocoding, all of your geoprocessing is done by a GIS server. Image Server is a role that unlocks advanced raster analysis and image hosting. Because you're spreading the server resources across multiple machines, you can derive some really impressive insights from your imagery using the image server role. Geo Event Server is all about real-time data. It allows you to hook up your sensor networks, your Internet of Things, and to take in multiple event streams, event data simultaneously. Geo Analytics Server is our big data analysis role, where Image Server handles our big data or our big raster data sets. Geoanalytics is going to handle big data in vector and tabular formats. And it works best when it has 3 machines to distribute the processing of large data sets. You've probably seen geoanalytics in action at the plenary, handling incredible amounts of data in a few minutes. It does that because it distributes the processing along multiple machines in your server network. And our last server role, our newest, is Notebook Server. It was introduced this year, and it hosts ArcGIS notebooks, which are a Python-based interactive development environment to visualize your GIS content and run some very impressive data science workflows. So I'd like to call out a little bit more detail about Notebook Server. When you include it in your workflows, you're unlocking the ability to script some really powerful analysis, but also content management and administration tools. You can use notebooks to do things like clean up your portal, clean up the licensing in your portal, or manage users using the ArcGIS API for Python, which is a very popular library that allows not just data science, but also to work with kind of the meta of your portal, to work with users and work with your portal administration. Notebook Server has primarily been shown off as a really powerful data science platform because it brings in ArcPy into a notebook environment. This is the first time that ArcPy has been available in a Python notebook, which allows you to really combine not just code, but documentation, explanations of what you're coding, and then to be able to visualize the content that you're creating within the notebook environment. So a notebook is a very powerful document because it's very transparent, it's very reproducible. When you share it, your users are seeing exactly what you've done to get to where you're going, and in addition to seeing the results of your notebook. This opens up a whole world of automation solutions for your Web GIS. And Notebook Server can be scaled to accommodate as many authors as you need to be using notebooks. Because the notebook server is fully integrated into Enterprise Portal, it means that you can take advantage of all its capabilities and as well as the granular sharing permissions of the Enterprise Portal. From within in the notebook editor, you can add in any item that you have access to in the portal, and that will be added in as a variable. In the analysis tab of the notebook, you can add in any geoprocessing tool that's available in your portal, and it will add in the code snippet that defines that geoprocessing tool into a cell in your notebook. When you're finished with the notebook, you can share it with other users in the portal. Anyone who has the power to open and edit notebooks will receive a copy of that notebook that they can work on, see what you've done, and expand upon it. So notebooks are very exciting. There's a lot to learn about them. They came out at 10.7, our version which was released in March. If you'd like to learn more, we have 2 sessions tomorrow at 2:30 and 4, both in that ballroom over there. We also have a session tomorrow about raster analytics and the image server role that you can check out if you're interested in that.
Great. But beyond this, you might also be wondering what tools are available to you right out of the box. And by tapping into our standard analysis tools, you get 27 tools that can be used for your analysis and lets you pull deeper meaning from your data. So this is just an animation I made of some of all the tools that are available once you get everything configured together with ArcGIS Enterprise. And these are commonly used tools which can be easily accessed in the map viewer, and it lets you do a lot of things that are very commonly done in desktop workflows like buffers or aggregating, joining, things like that. If you'd like to see what other data is out there, you might be interested in exploring our Living Atlas of the World layers. This is a rich library of geospatial data that covers a wide range of applications, and you can access this out of the box within the portal with a minimal configuration. Through the Living Atlas, we have some great data sources that can help aid your work. You can pull it from the Living Atlas, you can put it into your web maps, you can use it to fuel your data as well. We have a couple of sessions for Living Atlas of the World that you might be interested in attending. One this afternoon and also one tomorrow at 10 a.m. So you might want to take a look at those, find them in the events app and add them to your calendar if you're interested. But once you have all of your data in ArcGIS Enterprise, you're able to easily manage it with the help of groups, which lets you ensure that specified users have access to certain data sets. Beyond groups, there's a lot of other things that you can employ, like content categories, which in the animation there shows is a wide range of heavily customizable categories that you can use to enforce a data structure across your organization. You can use categories that we provide, or you can make your own categories. You can modify them as you see fit. You can also pick and choose which data you want to be marked as authoritative or deprecated. And our system provides guidance on how to make sure your data is well documented and findable with a built-in information bar. These features and more ensure that regardless of how large your Web GIS becomes, you as an administrator can stand up and maintain effective content management practices.
When it's time for you to make web apps, ArcGIS Enterprise is very powerful in the number of tools that it offers for you to make web apps. If you need to, depending on what you need to do with it, what kind of experience you have, how much time you want to spend, and how configurable you want your app to be. Do you want it to be very customized to your organization's look and feel, or do you want to just quickly produce an app with minimal coding that can be pushed out to your users? We have everything from very fine-grained APIs to things like the Web App Builder, which is integrated with the ArcGIS Enterprise portal, a very easy drag-and-drop app builder that you can then push out. And there are even app templates and configurable apps that make it even easier and faster to create web apps from the web maps that are hosted in your enterprise portal. The last note about power is a little bit about responsibility, as Uncle Ben said. When you have really powerful items that are in your system, and when you have a lot of users that are relying on the content that's in your system, you have a responsibility to keep the content secure and to ensure that the content is always available to users. So Enterprise focuses heavily on the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is a common cybersecurity framework that we use to guide our tools and our practices. We want you to be able to choose the level of security of your enterprise. And we'll talk about that a little bit about the choices that you have for security in the next section. And also to be aware of who's using your site and what they're doing on it. We want you to be able to guarantee that your authoritative data keeps its integrity and is not improperly accessed or improperly edited. And we want you to be able to minimize or eliminate the downtime or data loss that would occur in the event of machine failure. This is through the area of high availability and disaster recovery, taking backups, having strategies, not just the tools, but the practices that your organization uses and relies on to ensure redundancy. In the case of machine failure, to say, I know that my content is going to stay up, I know that my content is not going to be lost, and I know that my users will be able to rely on my content and my site being up as quickly as possible. So all these things hand you power. Being aware of your content, being on top of it, is a really powerful thing. For some more information on security, we have a couple of sessions tomorrow, one at 10 and one at 1, about security in ArcGIS Enterprise. This is really going to be tailored for users who are going to be administrators who want to know all about what they can do to prevent threats and to integrate their security systems into ArcGIS Enterprise. The next word that we're using is flexible. ArcGIS Enterprise is very versatile. It provides a lot of options when you're deploying and a lot of options once your site is up and ready as your needs change and as your traffic patterns change. It's very scalable, it's very adaptive. And we work hard to make sure that it can be integrated into your existing IT, your systems, and your practices. Now, no two enterprise deployments are the same. That's because every Web GIS is deployed for different reasons. There are a lot of different budget levels. There are a lot of different resources. There are a lot of different uses that enterprise is deployed for. Your team looks different. Your organization looks different. And the reasons that you're ultimately deploying Web GIS are different. They all serve different functions for different groups. So the most important thing that you can do is to plan ahead, is to ask a lot of good questions about what you're going to be doing with it, and then tailor the options that we provide to you to that strategy. Those questions might be, who needs access to my Web GIS? Who's going to be using it? How much access do they need? What kind of things should they not be able to do in my Web GIS? How much work needs to be done? How often? Do we need to ensure that the site should never go down, that there should never be downtime? Once you have those things, those questions answered, you can start to make some statements. We have this amount of resources that we will need for our GIS. We need to have this many people in the organization. They need to have this much access. We as administrators need to have this much control over the back-end infrastructure. We want to be able to tune it. We want to be able to dovetail it with our existing IT systems. We need to have this level of security. So with all this strategy options in mind, Thomas is going to walk you through the options that you have to accomplish the strategy.
Thanks. So when you are strategizing on how to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise, like Scott said, you have a lot of options that might work best for your organizational needs. First, you should consider your infrastructure type. You should understand whether you're working with physical machines, maybe virtual machines, a cloud environment, maybe you're using a mixture of all of these things. Next, you should consider what size your deployment should be, or what it can be. ArcGIS Enterprise can be deployed on a single machine, on a large number of machines, depending on your available resources. You should consider the scale of your resources before you deploy. Scott went over all the great capabilities that ArcGIS Server can give you depending on the way it's licensed. So if you want to work with something like real-time data, you might need to plan for your deployment to include machines for ArcGIS GeoEvent Server. There are various server roles and add-ons that might require you to have separate machines that they'll be deployed on and then added into your site. Next, you may want to establish a highly available deployment so that you have a plan for redundancy and guaranteeing system uptime in the event of a machine failure. Beyond that, ArcGIS Enterprise has other options for your backup and restore strategies, which are also worth exploring. And finally, regardless of which type of environment you choose to go with, there is a deployment tool that can assist. We have a list here of all the various deployment tools that can be used, and we have people on the showcase that can walk you through them, but essentially they're all fine-tuned and tailored for whichever choices you make. If you're working with the cloud, we have cloud options. If you want everything on one machine for testing, we have the Enterprise Builder. You can also just manually install the software yourself and go through the installation wizards, but we have options for you. There's ultimately no wrong or incomplete way to implement a Web GIS. Whether your organization is fully using ArcGIS Enterprise fully using ArcGIS Online, or maybe a combination of the two, our systems are designed so that they will work together. Maybe you have an organization where you want to leverage some of your content or base maps from ArcGIS Online while still managing your own infrastructure in ArcGIS Enterprise. This is easy to achieve. Similarly, maybe you'd prefer to be in complete control over your Web GIS with all your content and base maps locally stored in your infrastructure. Maybe you want to lock the environment down so that it works in a disconnected environment. This is also something that's achievable with some configurations.
And in the next section, we'll be talking a little about collaboration, in which way you can move content from enterprise to online. So once your site is deployed, you still have a responsibility to monitor and maintain and manage your deployment. And part of that is to understand whether your traffic needs are still being met. They may grow or change over time. Your user base may change over time as well. And that's why you need a scalable system. So ArcGIS Enterprise is built to scale. Some of that is automatic. For example, ArcGIS server services will add or remove the amount of processing resources that they are using, depending on how much traffic they've been receiving recently. In other ways, you can manually scale up or down. The most common way is by adding or removing machines from an ArcGIS server site or an ArcGIS data store implementation. These cloud deployments that Thomas was talking about allow you to use the auto-scaling tools that are available in Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure to, on the fly, based on traffic, scale up or scale down the resources that you're using. And we want to shout out our ArcGIS Monitor tool, which is a fairly new tool that lets you stay on top of all of your usage and your machine statistics. It's a very fine-grained, very powerful tool, more of a platform, really, that has a lot of different things that you can dig into to understand what I need to change, why I need to change it, and to be in complete control over what's happening. Our last note on flexibility is in the area of security. Now, many organizations, if not most, have a central identity provider. For example, Esri uses Okta. We have single sign-on that always, no matter what app I'm logging into, I have that Okta single sign-on. You might have Active Directory, you might have a SAML-based or an LDAP-based. If you have no idea what these things are, your life is probably better without knowing those things. But ArcGIS Enterprise comes in with the flexibility to integrate with that identity provider. It does have a built-in identity provider called ArcGIS Accounts that your users can create the first time they access your portal. But it also gives you the choice to integrate your authentication system. So for example, if you're using an LDAP based system, or if you're using Microsoft Active Directory in your organization, you can choose instead to have users be presented with that single sign-on prompt when they go to your portal. If you're using SAML-based provider, you actually can you have a choice to provide them with both. You can say either use an ArcGIS account or use my SAML Okta, whatever it is, and be taken to that single sign-on. This is a really flexible option for maybe contractors or visitors who don't have an organizational account but need to sign on and access what's in your portal. So again, the theme here is that you have the choice. You know your organization and its needs best, so you should be able to take control of your deployment, and we're letting you do that. We have a session coming up on Wednesday about architecting your deployment. Today's Wednesday, so that's going to be at 4 p.m. I'm not really even sure what day it is. So at 4 today, in about an hour, this is probably the best session I can recommend for you if you are just starting out and are going to be architecting ArcGIS Enterprise. Philip does a great job of telling you all the options that Thomas has laid through and keeping in mind the planning aspect of ArcGIS Enterprise and understanding that I'm in complete control of this throughout my deployment. There's also people downstairs who can talk about high availability and disaster recovery, and they'll be talking tomorrow at 10 a.m. About those options to ensure redundancy. Our last adjective is collaborative. ArcGIS Enterprise is all about sharing. It's all about working together in that Web GIS portal in order to accomplish things that you can't do on desktop alone. Now, this might be with people who are on your same level, sharing with the other GIS analysts in your department. It may be about collaborating with people who are not GIS people. It may be people who don't speak the language of GIS and maybe can't just work with a web map or a web app. They might want to see things in a simpler way. No matter what, we have the tools for you to be able to collaborate with people across your GIS and across your organization. Content sharing has always been central to Web GIS, but today's enterprise portal is carefully designed and designed to be intuitive and secure in the way that you share content. You can share all kinds of content in the portal, and you can create groups of users within the portal, of the named users within your portal, so that you can give content access to some users but not to all. Within these groups, it's a very powerful way to limit who's seeing what and who's working with whom. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the sharing model of the portal and the security model of the portal. Every item in the portal has the same sharing ability. So an item is considered anything in the portal, whether that's a web map, a web app, a shapefile, a CSV, everything, by the way, on that scrolling list on the right, which I do expect you to memorize, it does get treated as a portal item. And in that vein, it is able to be shared. And the sharing is controlled, as you can see on the left screenshot, by that icon on the right side of the portal. So I can share things in a few different ways. I can choose to keep it just by myself. If I own the item, only I and my administrators can see the item. I can choose to share an item with multiple groups. As I said, this is a way to say I have my GIS analyst group, and I want them to see this, but I don't want anyone else to see this or mess with it. I can share an item with my whole organization. This map needs to go to everyone who's working in my portal, who has access to the portal. Or if I have a public-facing portal, I can share it with everyone. I can make it available like a web app that needs to be available to the public, can see that as well. This is kind of a sliding scale based on the granular level of who needs to see what. Content sharing is not limited to the members of your portal alone. We have a capability called distributed collaboration. This is a very powerful tool to extend the reach of that of your content sharing without losing that security, the familiar sharing model that you have with the portal. You can set up collaboration between multiple portals or between a portal and an ArcGIS online organization. Collaborations are pipelines based on trust. To establish them, administrators send back trust keys. Once the trust is set up, the collaboration can be used to share content in that same way as you would share an item from the portal. You can share it into the collaboration, and it will be sent down the pipeline to the participant in that collaboration. You are in control of what gets shared and how often it gets shared, and you can control whether it gets synchronized often. Perhaps if you have a living document that you want to update and have those updates automatically get synchronized across the collaboration, you can do that. Ultimately, this is about what Jack talks about as a system of systems, connecting multiple portals, connecting systems to accomplish what an individual organization might not be able to do by itself. This might be I have many departments in my organization. It may be I have, I'm sharing between cities. I want to share from my enterprise alone to my ArcGIS Online organization to make certain things public after I've worked hard to make them production ready. There are a lot of use cases and a lot of different setups you can take with distributed collaboration. And we're always expanding with each new release the things that you can share in collaborations, what you can do with it, the kind of granularity you have once you have shared something in a collaboration. Ultimately, this is all about the flexibility to have a central hub or whatever you need to accomplish your workflows outside of your portal. The last thing I want to talk about with collaboration is enterprise sites. This was our big ticket item last year in 2018. This was a pretty big new item that was released. It is a capability within ArcGIS Enterprise that allows you to customize front pages of your GIS for your organization, kind of landing pages for specific groups of people. That might be your firefighters, or it might be your emergency management personnel. It could be your boss, it could be your politicians, people who might not speak the language of GIS. It might need to be dumbed down, especially for the politicians. And they need to see the curated content in a very specific way. So what you're able to do is provide this very good looking, customizable, has your look and feel, your logo, and you control exactly what appears on that page. It can be a table, it can be a chart, it can be a full operations dashboard, it can be a map or an app. You're in control of what gets seen, And ultimately, it's about those users being able to go in and particularly choosing what they need to see and very quickly. You can also dive deeper by adding multiple pages. Perhaps you want to provide more reports or specific event descriptions to your site that doesn't want to go on the front page. People can really dive into these pages, and it's all about giving you the power to control what gets seen by these users. We have a session on ArcGIS Enterprise sites that will be tomorrow in this ballroom at 8:30 a.m. if you're awake that early. There's also our distributed collaboration sessions have already occurred for UC this year, but we do have a number of blog posts that really dive into collaboration, the different use cases, such as the one that's on the screen here, and tell you how to get started and how to make them secure, how to make them really functional for your organization.
Speaking of the ArcGIS blog, I wanted to take this moment to talk about different ways that you can learn more about ArcGIS Enterprise at this point. To start, I'll talk about our documentation. We have a lot of great information in our documentation, which is always being updated with each release and is written in a way that's easy to follow and understand. Whether you're an administrator or otherwise, I recommend that you take a look at this as your first step towards answering any questions that you have when you get back home. Now, next up is our ArcGIS blog. We have a bunch of incredibly talented writers and contribute content to these blogs and it covers a wide range of content, whether it's an ArcGIS Enterprise workflow to something that's Web GIS specific in general, or even something with other apps and products that interact with ArcGIS Enterprise. We've got blogs and content that you can learn more about. Last but not least is GeoNet. This is a robust and immensely helpful user community where you can find forums, engage with fellow users, and also post ideas on what we have. We have a part on GeoNet called ArcGIS Ideas. This is where you'll post your feedback or any wishes you have for the product, things that you'd like to see improved or changed for your specific workflows. We at Esri review these ideas and we comment on them whenever we can, and I speak from experience that we really highly value all the great feedback that you share with us, that you've shared with us already, and we look forward to any more in the future.
So that's all we have. We've defined enterprise as these 4 words. We hope that it was helpful for you to understand what the product is. Again, we think that it's supposed to be the central hub for organizations who deploy enterprise. It's supposed to be the foundation of your system and connect to everything else in the Esri stack, not replacing any particular component, but instead powering these new Web GIS workflows that really expand what your organization can do. It offers power, but also accessibility and efficiency. It offers you a lot of different options, both when you're deploying and after you've already deployed. And it's collaborative in that you're able to work with everyone inside and outside of your portal and have complete control over what you're sharing and how it gets shared. As always, we want to urge you to share the feedback in the app. It really helps. And we have left some of our business cards over on the side table. Feel free to take one. If you'd like for us to send you the slides from today's talk, please leave your business card and we'll send those to you as well. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Any questions? Come see us as well.
Thank you.